Functions. Five things that you must know about inverses. And actually, I'm going to change that. I'm going to say four things because we wiped this out, I think, a couple of years ago. Okay, so you must know these four concepts. You know what? Maybe I will include five next week. Yeah, maybe I'll put it back in there. Okay, so number one, to find inverses, you switch the x and the y. Okay, if I switch the x and the y in an equation, what's going to happen to my domain and range, do you think? Yeah, they're going to switch, right? So that's the second thing you should know. To find the inverse, you switch the x and the y. Therefore, the domain and range are going to switch. Okay? To graph the inverse, you reflect the original graph over the line y equals x. Now, do you guys know what the y equals x line is? I'm going to show you. So I'm going to go down here to a graph, and I'm going to graph the y equals x line. Now, remember, we choose x and then we solve for y, right? If I choose 0 for x, what's y?
0.
If I choose 1 for x, what's y?
1. It's
But
just up, down, over 1.
yeah. So it's a line that goes from one corner of the graph to the other, right? Okay, that's my y equals x line. Now, this line really becomes important if you guys go on in mathematics, okay? So you should really know what that y equals x line, where it is, and where it's located. And the fourth one, the inverse. Oh, this one's wordy. Okay, this is really it's hard to explain. It's easier to show. The inverse is a function if the original graph passes the horizontal line test. Okay. It's easier to show you when we get down to number six what this is, what this really means. Okay. Let's go ahead and do the other concepts first. And like I said, five, I think I might do Monday. All right. So, in number one, is this a function? This is a T chart sideways, right? Is this a function? I have my domain -2, -1, 0, 1, 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, why?
Because
The x's don't repeat, right? That's the easiest way to tell if it's a function or not. So this is my original graph, which is a function. So I'll say original function. And this is going to be my inverse, and we'll have to see if it also is a function. Okay, so I'm going to take my x's, gonna switch them to the domain for the y's. So my x's become y's. -1, 0, 1, 2. And my y's become the domain. The y's become my x's. So 4, 2, 0, -2, and 4. All right, any questions on changing the domain and range? It's just a concept you need to know. All right, number two and number three, we actually start computing or what the what the inverse functions are. Number two, by the way, is number two a function? What kind of graph do I have here? Anybody remember? Let me help you out. Does it kind of look like that? And what is this? Yeah, it's just a line, right? It's just a line. Y equals mx plus b. That's slope intercept form. Okay, so we have a line here. To figure out what the, and we know 99% of all lines are functions, except the vertical line, right? So the way we start this off is we switch the x and the y. So we're going to take the x and the y and we're going to switch them. This is how we find the inverse. So I have x equal 2y minus 4. Then we solve for y. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So I get x plus 4 equals 2y. And then I'm going to divide by the coefficient 2. Now, because we're just finding the inverse, I'm going to divide this whole thing by 2, and I'm not going to simplify it. Okay? So, x plus 4 divided by 2 equals my inverse function. Now, to denote this as an inverse function, I'm going to put a little minus 1 there. So that's my inverse function. Questions? All right, number 3. Step 1 is to switch the y and the x. So I have x equal negative 2/3 x plus 6. We have another line here, right? I have to, oh, I'm sorry, this is a y. I keep doing this. I have to solve for y. So I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. So I get x minus 6 equals negative 2/3 y. What's the easiest way to get rid of a fractional coefficient? I think I heard it. Multiply by its reciprocal. So the reciprocal is negative 3/2. Don't forget you have to do it to both sides. So all of these cancel the 1 over here. I get my inverse, y inverse, right? Now, I'm going to distribute this negative 3/2. It's good practice. So negative 3/2 x. What's negative 3/2 times negative 6? It's going to be a positive. Negative, negative is a positive. Don't remember how to do it. Put it in your calculator, okay? Let's see. Negative 3 divided by 2 times negative 6. 9. Here's my inverse function. I know it's a function because this is another line. Questions? Okay. Let's do this whole the inverse is a function if the original passes the horizontal line test. And again, it's kind of wordy and it's kind of hard to explain it. Let's visualize it. So here's my original graph. By the way, my original graph, is that a function? No. Does not pass the vertical line test. So, with the inverse of the functions graph below, these are not all functions, okay? This one is not a function. So, it says the original graph, the inverse is a function if the original graph passes the horizontal line test. So, here's my horizontal line. Remember the line tests? They can only intersect the graph at one point, right? So if I have this horizontal line and does it only intersect this graph at one point? Yes. So the original graph, let's do this. Let's say this. Original graph passes the horizontal line test. Therefore, and we got a little symbol in math for therefore, we don't, because it's written out a lot. It's just 3 dots in a triangle. Therefore, the inverse is a function. Makes sense visually? A lot more than, reading it. And if we did reflect this about the y equals x line, you'd have a parabola opening upwards, right? Something like that. And that does pass the vertical line test. All right, let's do another one. So I have, looks like it could be a sound wave, some kind of frequency. And I'm going to go ahead and do the horizontal line test. Does this pass the horizontal line test? Crosses there, crosses there, crosses there, crosses there. Look at all these places it crosses. It does not pass. Or better yet, let's use the word fails. Fails horizontal line test. Therefore, inverse is not a function. What about this cubic graph here? Does this pass the horizontal line test? Yeah. It's only at one point intersects. So this does pass horizontal line test. Therefore, inverse is a function. Okay? Not that I should complain, but you guys are quiet today. You know why? Because Doug's not here. Okay. All right, if I have the g of x, if I have function notation, I'm going to replace that function notation and put a y there. Okay? Because I need to switch the y and the x, right? So I have x equals 5y minus 2, and I need to solve for y. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So I have x plus 2 equals 5y. Divide by 5. Now I'm going to divide this whole thing by 5 because we're not going to graph. We don't need to simplify it. So I have x plus 2 over 5. That equals my inverse. Don't forget the little minus 1 to denote that it's an inverse. Now, if you go on in math to the higher math courses, like pre-calc and stuff. Yes.
Hi, are you available?
Okay, so if you go on in math, sometimes your pre-calc teacher might want you to write this, put it back in function notation. So x plus 2 over 5 equals the g of x. Just put the little minus 1 with the g of x. All right, number 10. Going to replace the f of x with y. Then I'm going to switch the y and the x. Does anybody know what's going to happen to this one? Anybody can foresee the future here? So I have x equals 4 over y. Solve for y. I have a fraction, so I need to get rid of that denominator, right? So I'm going to multiply both sides by the denominator y. And I get y times x equals 4. Then I have to do what? Divide by x. So my x's cancel, and I get the inverse equals what? 4 over x. Tricky, huh? My original function, actually, this is not a function because x is in the denominator. My original graph is 4 over x. My inverse is also 4 over x. And if I want to put it back in function notation, the f of x inverse equals 4 over x. Okay, so either one of these. Now, 11 and 12, I kind of skipped for my other classes. Explain how to use a horizontal line test. I get a feeling if I try to explain this to you, you'll get more confused than actually seeing it. Just like we did on the, with these graphs and I tried to like explain it to you here. It's easier to see it, right? So I'm gonna leave these out. Yeah, I'll just confuse you. Any All right, let's do number 2. Okay. I'm going to replay now. Everyone's got their homework. I'm going to replace this f of x with y. Then I'm going to switch the y and the x. So I get x equals 1/4 y plus 3/4. Okay? I'm going to subtract 3/4 from both sides. So I get x minus 3/4 equals 1/4 y. And again, what's the easiest way to get rid of a fractional coefficient? Multiply it by its reciprocal, 4/1, which is just 4, right? Okay, going to have to distribute 4 times x, 4x, 4 times negative 3/4, negative 3. These 1/4 and 4/1 cancel, so there's my y inverse. Okay. I'm going to do another one for you. I'm going to do number 5. I'm going to do one of the graphics. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is put a y here. So I have y equals negative 2x plus 8. It says find the inverse of each function. Then graph the function and its inverse. Well, I'm going to graph this. This is a line, right? Y equals mx plus b. Y equals mx plus b. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and graph this line before I find the inverse. What's my y-intercept? Remember how to graph in slope-intercept form? Y-intercept is 8. My slope is the coefficient of the x, which is negative 2, or negative 2/1. And so I cross the y-axis at 8, somewhere up here. Then I'm going to go down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. Is this coming back to you? So here's my line. Here's my original graph. And actually, since it's not a vertical line, it's a function. So there's my original. Okay, we have to find the inverse, right? All right, so I'm going to switch the y and the x. So I have negative 2y plus 8. Going to subtract 8. Subtract 8. So I have x minus 8 equal negative 2y. Now, since I'm going to have to graph this, I'm going to have to divide every term by 2. I'm sorry, negative 2. There's a 1 in front of that x, right? So my inverse is going to be negative 1/2 x, negative 8 divided by negative 2, positive 4, and then that's my y inverse. All right, what's my b? Positive 4, right? My slope, negative 1/2. So here's where it crosses my y-axis. Down 1 over 2, down 1 over 2, down 1 over 2. Here's my inverse graph. So here's my inverse. Do you see how it's reflected about the y equals x line? Here's my y equals x line. See how they're kind of reflected about that line? Questions, comments, concerns?